So I wanted to show you a couple more things about this antenna. I'm going to switch the camera. One point is that the loss of this RF cable that goes from the antenna to the SA input port, this black cable, is not included in the antenna factor. You can add it yourself as a cable loss as another factor, but it's not in the antenna factor. It may not be a lot of loss, and if you're doing over-the-air measurements, maybe half a dB, 1 dB is not a big deal, but just be aware of it. It's this black cable that's split. And then the second item I'm going to point out to you is what happens if you don't have the USB connection connected. I mean, the expectation is that it's plugged in, but I want to show you so you know what it is when the USB is not plugged in. So here we have the antenna hooked up. We're at 6 gigahertz, and I have the antenna. The USB is connected. I'm in auto position, and you're reading about minus 67 dBm in auto. This is the antenna's connected. The switch is not an X, Y, or a Z, but it's terminated in some load or something. So you're getting the switch isolation. Now if I disconnect, I'm pulling out the USB. You can see the power level drop. There's nothing out there. It's just some open element. And this would, you expect this because you're like, okay, there's no USB power, the power is lower. Now let's do the same experiment at 1 gigahertz. I'm going to change this frequency to 1 gig. And I'm going to change my source to 1 gigahertz. Marker to peak. Right now my USB is not connected. Nothing's connected, and I'm reading minus 48 dBm. Okay, this used to be minus 45, but it's just something over there. So it's minus 48. Now I'm going to actually go ahead, because see, if I go here and I say X, it'll say can't set it because my USB is not connected. But what I will do is I'm going to go plug it in. Now it's now plugged in. Now it's an auto. Now it's reading minus 76. So this is the opposite. It's sort of, you think I've plugged it in, but it's actually reading lower, because what happens when it's reading lower, you have the switch isolation, but that isolation varies with frequency. And so it's just, we're not expecting people to use it without the USB, but understand what is happening. Auto is off, but the switch is actually, it's terminated in some load or whatever setting it is. The antenna is activated. The other point I wanted to make is we talked about how if you're in channel power, measure channel power, you had this EMF choice and summing all of them. If you're in other modes like RTSA, you don't have the choice of selecting the sum of all three, which is the value of this antenna. But if you wanted to just use it like in one of the axes, you could. You could go into USB antenna, and let's put it to X. And I think my frequency of my signal gen is now 1 gigahertz. Frequency, 1 gig. And there's your signal. So you can use it as an antenna just with XYZ. You just can't get the sum of all three in the other modes. The other factor is in OTA. If you're in 5GNR, in here, I have to go back to I don't have my Signal Studio set up. If I go to 3.5 gigahertz and turn mod on, let's see if it remembers it. In here, you can't change the antenna factors. The antenna factors are whatever is imported. I showed you in SA mode, you could make it 0 dBm to see the impact. Here, you don't have control over it, so it is what it is. Again, generally, you're satisfied with what it's come, but I just wanted you to know that you don't have that choice. The other thing to point out is if I go to measure, where is the EMF? It's here, unable to culture enter. Oh, maybe it's not set to auto. Oh, there it is. Let's go to auto. Okay. If I turn EMF on, then I get the values in dB microvolts per meter. There's your 58. If I turn it off, it shows a value and it shows a dBm value, but you can't do that conversion here that I showed in the other SA mode. You add 107, you add 105, add the antenna factor. Because in EMF measurement on, this is a valid measurement that's using all three axes, doing the RSS sum, getting the dBm, and then converting it to dB microvolt. With EMF off, it's not even using the antenna. It's kind of like this open case. I mean, the USB is connected, but these values are not meaningful. You can't control each axis, and this is not the power sum of all three axes in dBm. So it's just some open measurement. So again, and you'll see it varies, but if you come to EMF on, then that's the EMF power in the control channel of your 5G signal in dB microvolts per meter. And that's it.